Yeah, thanks again for the invitation and having the chance to speak to you a second time. So we had a very inspiring speech from my colleague from AFD already, and what he said exactly applied to Austria, I would say 12 months ago. We had some changes in the last 12 months, and I think it's particularly interesting for you what's going on in Austria and what changed after the new coalition was formed. So just about the situation in Austria. There was in April 17 was a sort of, I would say, almost coup in our so-called conservative party, which is the Christian Democratic Party calling itself the People's Party. That they followed a policy similar to the Merkel policy of the CDU, even to the left of what the Bavarians do, the CSU as they call themselves. And the party went down as the CDU is now going down, so they were at 24% in the last but one elections, in the elections of 2013. And in the polls, they were already down at 18. We have been at 20% in 2013, and in the polls we have been up to 28, 29, and we were equal with the Social Democratic Party. We were first, second, first in the polls. And then Kurz, he's called Sebastian Kurz, a young guy who is now a chancellor. He was 29 and foreign minister already for 4 years in the government. He was by far the most popular guy in the party, and his ratings were overwhelmingly positive. He was the only positive guy in the whole party, the only one with positive rating. And he built up his own structure, and he made really a sort of a coup. So he changed all the top people in the party, and he also changed course. That was very good for the country. It was not that good for us, because he could convince a lot of voters that his party is doing the same job that we promised to do, especially to crack down on immigration as a general, not only on illegal immigration, but cracking down on immigration as a general phenomenon. And with that, he really got a good result. He brought the party from 24 to almost 31% in the last elections, October 2017. We could climb from 20 to 24 something, not bad even. The Social Democrats, they stayed at 26, something like that, as they have been before. The Greens were thrown out of the parliament. They dropped from 12.6 to something 3.5%. So they were really crushed. That was the good thing, because usually when the Social Democrats don't gain, the Greens gain. But in this case, the so-called leftist camp was really weakened. It was really weakened. The left part of our society lost around 10% of the votes. So there was really a massive shift from left to the right. So, and it was a big majority of ÖVP, that's what the party of Kurz is called, Österreichische Volkspartei, Austrian People's Party. There was a big majority of his party and our party, and there was, of course, a big pressure on our party to form a government with him. Our party boss was very reluctant to do so, because he understood very well the dangers of going into a coalition with such a party. We have been in a coalition with the ÖVP already from 2000 to 2002, and then again from 2000 to 2006, and this brought the party from 28% to 10%. So we were almost annihilated in this procedure. We had to suffer a split and so on, because we were tied up in the first coalition, so we could do nothing what we promised to the voters, because everything was a red line for the coalition partner. So there was really a reluctance in our party, I can say, to enter a coalition again, but there was a lot of pressure. Everyone said, if you're not going into the government, then the people will be disillusioned. They will say, what's the value of voting for FPÖ if they just stay opposition and they have a big mouth, but they can do nothing. If they have the chance to do something for us, they refuse. So in the end, we went into that coalition. There is a very tight coalition pact who is limiting us in what we are allowed to say and what we are allowed to do, but gives us a fair share of the power, of course. We have the Ministry for Interior Affairs, for Defense, for foreign affairs, and for social affairs, which is a difficult ministry. The last one is the most difficult one. So this is quite a power, but of course, on the other side, now there is no opposition in Austria, you must say that, because the people that now claim to be opposition, the Social Democrats and a splinter group from the Greens who just managed to get in, and the liberal group, they're calling them the Neos, the new ones, a splinter group who made something like 6% in the election. They are not an opposition, but they are firm part of the system. When I speak about opposition, I don't mean not being in the government, but I mean not being part of the system, of the ruling elite. And as Paul Hampel already figured out, the ruling elite in Europe, not only in Austria, but in virtually all the countries, is not working in the interest and in the benefit of the people. Yeah. We have seen that, right? Paul Hampel mentioned the major subjects where you can see that starts from the Eurozone disaster to the mass migration. It goes from the way culture is indoctrinated to the people, it goes to the education, it goes to the situation on the universities, it goes on this madness about climate change, building windmills and all that. It goes generalized in giving a small field to the people where they can get rid of their political energy. For example, if you want to stand up against the system, there are certain things you are allowed to do. And this is, for example, fighting the climate change. Before that, we had fighting against the death of the forests and so on. You also mentioned that. This is something you're allowed to do. Now they're starting even to allow us to be against radical Islam. This is also to let pressure out. You're allowed now to stand up and say, I'm against radical Islamists. Not against Islam, but against political Islamists and hate speeches in the mosque. You're allowed to do that. Other subjects, by the system, you're not allowed to say. So the issue is when a party that tries to support the people against the system, the ruling elites, elite not working in their interest, enters the government in some way, they become part of the system. So the narrow path we have to follow now is being in the system, being in the government, without betraying the people that voted for us, and without doing nothing but stabilizing the system that works to the detriment of the people that pay for it. So this is the small line you have to follow. And every party from out of the system who enters the government will have this challenge. Paul Hampel already spoke about that. So we are not quite on equal footing with the ÖVP, with the People's Party, but almost. So it's 24 to 30.8. So it's not much difference. It's just 6 point something difference. It's not much difference. And we have an equal share in the government. But of course, we don't have an equal share in the media. And we have no equal share in the scenery of arts, of entertainment, international relations, of support from abroad, and so on. There we are very isolated. So while the People's Party can draw a lot of support from the medias, still, even if they cruise on borderlines, Kurz is very clever. He is just moving on a borderline. He's doing what the system is just allowing him to stand for. So he's really opposing Merkel, he's opposing Juncker, he's opposing the EU migration policy, he's opposing even the culture establishment in Austria. He does a lot, but he's not crossing certain red lines. What would be a red line? Let's start with the European Union. The European Union, if you speak about reforming it, you're just on the right side of the red line. If you start speaking about destroying it or only leaving it, you cross the red line. And the system will really go for you. It will really go for you. So now, we didn't openly go for leave before, because this is a thorny issue in Austria. The people are afraid to leave the Union. They say it's a small country, we are surrounded by EU countries, we have no Commonwealth history, we don't have the big brother on the other side of the Atlantic, not the Australian, New Zealanders, Indians, they all have emotional ties, we have nothing. We will be surrounded in Ireland and will be on the mercy of the European Union. So the people are afraid. Only about 30% would vote for leaving the EU. So even our party, of course, is afraid of taking over such an argument. So we are also now to reform the European Union, which is, to be honest, impossible. It's impossible, because you need an anonymous decision by all member states to change the constitution. And this will never be obtained if you try to wind back the competences of the Union. But still, official policy is to reform it, to go for a new constitutional caucus and wind down parts of the Lisbon Treaty, which will never happen. So what you can do in the Union, you can block the worst. So there is a lot of leverage you have against the Union. For example, if Brexit really goes through, they will miss around 15 to 17 billions a year in their budget, which is quite a lot. That's really hurting, because their overall budget is something like 128 billion. So they miss a lot, and no one is really ready to fill the gap. Most of the members can't fill the gap, and the ones that could fill the gap are not willing, and filling the gap would increase the backlash against the European Union. So there we have a leverage. If the government, the Austrian government, would really be strong in organizing a group of members blocking a takeover of the missing sum by other countries, that would be a big success, because that would give us a leverage to the European Union. Kurz, when he was still foreign minister, he already officially said the 15 billions we will lose in Brexit, they must be economized. We must scale down the apparatus, so 15% of the employees have to go, because 15% of the deputies will go, so we will have to cut everything by 15%, so that everything is scaled back to the new 27-member group. Now, of course, the deputies will not be scaled back proportionally. It will be given to others. Not everything, but part will be covered by others. And there is no idea of economizing even 1 cent in the European Union. There is no program, no planning, no idea, no speech about it. No. It is completely clear Europe needs the money. And every cent we invest in Europe is a good investment. It's investment in our future, and it's investment in peace, because the EU is the biggest peace project in Europe. The EU has very much to do with a religious sect. You have a sort of, the Catholics, they say catechism. Catechism, that's a book of arguments who explain you why everything you believe in is just true. And the most striking argument for being an absolute rogue guy, not endorsing further European integration, is that you are against peace. You're against peace. Because if you're against integration, you bring back the days before the Union came into existence, and that was the Second World War. If you want to go back to these days, then fine, let's break the Union up. If the Union is not there, then everyone will make war against each other. They don't say it, but they implicitly say that. So that's one of the arguments, to silence everyone. And as the system supporting the Union is well connected internationally, you have a lack, I would say a bad lack, of intellectually formulated opposition against the system. As they control the universities and the literature and the publishers worldwide, worldwide is wrong, sorry, in the so-called sphere of the Western values. So the world is not one world, but the world I speak about is Western Europe, parts of Eastern Europe, I will come back to this subject, and North America. The rest follows different patterns of decision. In Europe, we have a certain split now, fortunately, which was mentioned already. We have a split between the former communist countries and the so-called Western countries, the countries that got rid of communism in '89 because they have a different history of re-education. We in the West, we have a history of 70 years re-education, trying to denationalize us, to demonize national feeling, to demonize the feeling of being different, to demonize the feeling of independence, even to demonize the feeling of too much democracy, which is crazy. Yeah? For example, the worst thing you can ask for in the European Union is a referendum. You're the absolute devil if you mention the word referendum, because every single referendum after the countries became member, they had to do was negative, except the second referendum in Ireland. Yeah? But everywhere they put for example, the constitution on the table of the referendum, it was rejected. And even small issues were rejected. For example, the Danish, they voted in, I think it was 2012, they had a referendum on minor changes in their constitution to allow a better coordination of Europol. It was really a reasonable suggestion. But this was a demand from the European Union to integrate better into a European system of security. And it was rejected by the Danish with a vast majority, though all the parties campaigned pro. And in the Netherlands, it was just a few months later, there was a referendum about the treaty of association of the Ukraine with the European Union. This was also a subject, no one was really interested in the Netherlands about associating with the Ukraine. They didn't become members, it was just association. They got access to the markets and things like that. And even that was rejected. You know, it was only rejected as a sign of protest against the European Union. And that's also what others mentioned, that even the membership of the countries have been won through fraud. My country only joined in 1994, so we were latecomers because we are constitutionally neutral state, and as long as the Soviet Union existed, we didn't even dare to apply for membership. But after that, we applied, and there was a referendum in 1994. So in the polls, it was a close matter. It was a close matter at the beginning. It was 50-50. Of course, they promised, we will only enter economic union with open border. The Maastricht Treaty, which was new, already existing, is just good because it helps us to keep physical discipline. And it also helps us to liberalize our economy. And we will at any rate keep our beloved currency, shilling, because the EU has nothing to do with the single currency. So then there was a majority in '94. We entered, and the outcome is well known. Only 1.5 years later, they started to negotiate the Eurozone, and then came all the things my predecessor on this podium has already told. So that has to do with this different idea of democracy, tolerance, and so on the Western elites have. I would almost say this is George Orwell, of course, yeah, the famous author. This is Orwellian, you would say. Orwellian. This is an Orwellian change of the importance of words. Yeah. When they speak about pluralism, they mean excluding everyone who is not agreeing with us. Of course, yeah. This is not only the union, this is the media the same. When you speak about tolerance, it means we can do whatever we want, and the rest has to shut up. This is tolerance. Yeah. When you speak about the word in German is bunt, colorful. Yeah? When you speak about a colorful world, it means there is only one color, that's our color, and all the other colors have to be excluded because they are anti-European, anti-liberal, and so on. And when they speak about a pluralistic society and so on, it means not giving a stage to rightists. Yeah. That's a very important word. Not giving a stage to rightists. That is the right to exclude dissenters from the public discussion. not inviting them to TV discussions, not letting them write the articles in mainstream media, excluding journalists who don't comply, like Mrs. Katie Hopkins, I think. You understood her fate. Yeah? So this is the real democracy. So when they speak about pluralism, democracy, rule of law, tolerance, green, they mean a sort of, I say, enlightened absolutism. Yeah? It's called democracy, but it's not a democracy. It's a limited democracy where the elite, the ruling elite, decides what the people are allowed to decide. Yeah? And a referendum is a very dangerous thing because a referendum is not easily controllable. A party election is much more easy to control because you can isolate, criminalize, demonize parties. And even if the people agree, let's say 50% with what a party goes for, like AfD, yeah, only, maybe in Bavaria it was 11%. Only 11% vote for the party because the party is constantly demonized and you are shy to be part of a demonized group. You don't have to be a woman, also the men are shy. If this is the group and they are racist and they are threatening the integration of our country in the world, or they are threatening the exports of our car industry to the United States because they may be losing their snob value appeal or something, the cars, when we don't comply. So this is a system very difficult to break up. Very difficult to break up because you don't have a front line. You don't really see the enemy. Yeah? You feel like in a cage, but not with iron bars, but with rubber bars. Yeah? Yeah. You can knock, yeah? But you can't really get out. So this is the bad thing. Yeah? The good thing is that the rubber cage is on the brink of breaking, to my esteem. It's on the brink of breaking because of the split in Europe, because there have been virtual revolutions in some of the countries. What happened in Hungary was close to a real revolution. It was in the democratic content within the constitution, everything, but it was a revolution because the ruling system lost power there. They lost the power not politically alone, but they lost it in the medias, in the public discussion. They lost it in the universities, even in the theaters. And the same is happening now in Poland. We should not underestimate what is going on in Poland. So the Law and Order Party, PIS in Poland, they are really, really changing course. For us, it's not easy to cooperate with them because they have fear from the Germans. They have bad ideas about Austria from the time of the Habsburg Empire, when the south of Poland, called a small Polonia, Klein Poland, was part of the empire. So the dismembrance of the traditional Polish state was done by the Austrians, the Prussians, and the Russians. So on all the three, they're not quite easy about us. But things change. The people understand that what happened 200 or 300 years ago is of no importance to what happens today. And countries like Poland, Hungary, now Italy, if we have the courage to join them, they form a bloc the system, the Western system, will not be able to overcome. As you have seen, the first big failure of the Union and the forces behind was their failure to implement the distribution of the so-called refugees. There was a decision and there was a ruling from the European Court. They have to implement the decision is legal, though it was totally unconstitutional because it was not a majority matter. They decided, okay, but there is a ruling from the European Court, and everyone who is in the Union today and signed the Lisbon Treaty accepted the supremacy of the European Court. So, but still, they just don't comply, and the Union can do nothing because Poland is simply too big, and in alliance with Hungary now, with Italy falling in line, this is something completely different. So, this just a few ideas I wanted to give you about the situation in Austria, how I see the situation in Europe, but I will stop now in case you have questions, and I will go to precisely what you want to know. Thank you.